together on the emojis as we welcome Steve Kiteto.
All right. Thank you very much, Becky and the team at Karura Community Chapel for putting this together. Very, very crucial conversation. I'm excited to be here to share just some of the things that I have learned over the years as a practitioner handling teams and their parents, as you rightly mentioned, having worked at Tenari Trust for many years, and then now transitioned into Badili Experience, the company that runs Kizazi Kipya, which is our parenting arm of the expressions that we have, as well as other programs that we run, including couples program. We're very big on couples, parents, dads and their children, dad venture. We love the outdoors. Then we also do transition programs. If you're approaching 30, there's a program called 30 by 30, 30 things we wish you knew by age 30, that we run to prepare somebody to narrow down to their purpose. And then we also understand that 10 years after that, you begin navigating your midlife. And so we also have a midlife program called Mid Maisha, again, having a focal point on all these programs on children, especially Kizazi Kipya, because of the idea of a new generation. As a matter of fact, my wife and I got inspired to go upstream, having worked with adults a lot, and we still do. My wife did not work for Tenari, has worked for Bracken Adventures and Sky Adventures. We are both trainers. We work with a host of other trainers, associate facilitators, who we deliver these programs together. So just by way of introduction, we launching into Kizazi Kipya for us is one of those things that we feel is where, as a community, we need to all gather together as what I call as a kijiji, you know, as a village, with that idea, especially as Africans, that, you know, there's this tag that has always been used: it takes a village to raise a child. And there's a lot of truth in it, because we are not called to be solo parents. And so right from the word go, I'll be talking quite a bit about couples and how you raise your children. I'll also be focusing on single parents. And also there's a new, phenomenon growing of co-parenting. And those are issues that we must engage in, especially when you're talking about parenting. But allow me to just go straight in, because our time has gone a little bit, to share a couple of, stories for the next maybe 20 or so minutes, 25, and then I'll open it up for us to engage, especially with questions. So I'm really interested in getting to hear from you and interacting with your questions as well. So as I figure out, just give me a minute to load my all right, Becky, you might help me to just be able to load my slides. But as Becky, does that, I want to share a little story. When our daughter was 3 years old, and her sibling, who's 1.5 years older, was about 4.5. So my wife had traveled, and I was left with the kids. We had gone to church. And then I decided, as a dad, there's some things that we can do when mom is away. So we went to have fries with my daughters. So as we were sitting and just enjoying fries, a question came from nowhere. My 3-year-old told me, "Dad, I want to tell you something." I said, "Okay, share with me. What is it that you want to tell me?" Said, "I have a boyfriend." In fact, she was whispering. So she said, "I have a boyfriend." And because I have worked with young people, we are trained not to look shocked. And so I put on my, relaxed face, waiting to hear out what is this thing about boyfriend at age 3. Now, her sister, who's 4.5 at that time, was looking at her younger sibling with these eyes of like, just like, cut this story. You don't tell this kind of stuff to, your dad. And so I'm having, just at that moment, where does a 4-year-old, 4.5, get the nuance that there are conversations that you should not tell your dad, and there are some that you can tell your dad. And so all this is going through my mind. But then I relax and then go to ask just to see whether it's this story for real. Like, okay, what's his name? And she said, his name is Jacob. I said, wow, okay, here's a name. This time, 4.5-year-old, her sister is really laughing and thinking, I wish, you are not telling that. And so I said, Jacob, where did you meet Jacob? I said, I met him in church. And so, I just laughed it off and said, yeah, I think it's good to have friends, boys who are your friends, and girls who are your friends. Those are your girlfriends, and boys are your girlfriends. So I have to mention here as I move on that a lot of the things that I've been mentioning are practical things that you can go and do after this session. So I will not have a session to say, now these are the 4 points you will do. You will just pick it from the story, but I'll highlight for you something that we have done ourselves that you can also begin doing. So I've noticed you have about 30% who are age 1 to 6. So these are conversations that start there. One of the questions that I got from you is, at what age do you begin this sex sexuality conversation? And I would want to answer it straight up, is at any point where you have the opportunity. And I want to distinguish between sex and sexuality. Sexuality is about, anatomy, gender differences, boy, girl, and, mentioning all the parts of the body. Now, whether you choose to mention the parts of the body in their name, that is really up to you. I've had a lot of parents say, no, you should say it as it is. But then for me, I'm like, there's always, you can use euphemism, and it is allowed. Just like even in the Bible, you will see Abraham knew Sarah. For the proponents of mention it as it is, it doesn't say, Abraham, put his penis in Sarah's vagina. It becomes very repulsive. So I'll let it up to you to decide what language you want to use, as long as the child understands. But at sexuality, I would give it between age 0 or 1 to about 5. They need to have understood the differences and be very comfortable with what is where, and keep them private. Those are conversations that you need to have with your 1 to 6-year-old. So when do you start? As long as immediately they're able to talk and you're able to tell them this is a hand, it is time to also begin telling them these are your private parts. No one should see them. No one should touch them unless it's mom or dad or any allowed authority in the house. And that's it. So back to my story. So I'm now navigating this whole story of boyfriend, girlfriend. And then I begin asking them, why do you, why are you cringing when your sister was saying, she has a boyfriend? So they go, no, I mean, I'm okay. And I can tell that already she is steeped in a culture that already has begun telling her there is something around this sexuality. So it starts really early. Fast forward, they're now at that time age 6, and the younger one who, at age 4.5. So my 6-year-old comes and asks my wife, Mom, if you have sex, will you be taken to juvenile? Now, those are two things that we had never taught as parents. We had never taught them anything about sex, at least that word, and juvenile. This is new vocabulary. And so, Mom, if you have sex, will you be taken to juvenile? So what my wife did, thankfully we had the knowledge at that time, is not to look shocked, not to look surprised, because what we tend to do as adults is we react from our knowledge. Now you have to agree with me, the fact that you are here in this session is because you're very experienced. I mean, if you're not a youth worker, if you're a parent, because you're very experienced in these matters. And so when you really think about sex and sexuality, you're reacting from what you know and every virus that has been put in you since you were growing up. And so when you're reacting almost like, no, like, I mean, this, and you can overreact and even shut down the child and cut off communication completely. So the thing to do is relax and just have conversation, dig up and see how deep is this root? Where does it go? So what my wife did, she asked her, okay, so where did you hear this from? Said, mentioned the name of a girl. She was about 9 years older. And, said she's the one who told me that we'll be taken to juvenile. She seemed to have explained what juvenile is, but she didn't really say what sex is, okay? So up to that point, my wife was not comfortable, just like I'm sure a number of you, in just engaging in this talk. It was almost like, how do I begin talking to her about it? She's only 6. And so she relaxed on that conversation for quite a while. So I remember coming one day, you remember, you're like, but did you actually finish that conversation with her? Like, no. I asked, I think, twice, and I knew my wife was not ready to handle this. And so I decided I'm going to look for an opportunity to talk to her about this. By the way, I've shared this story on my page, Kizazi Kipya, on Facebook. And so you can catch the entire story, and you can like the page. And also Badili Experience has a page. I share some of these stories. And so if you've read it, you're just now hearing it. And so what happened is I began looking for an opportunity of how do I explain, because I know everything that we have taught. Having worked then at Tanari, we realized that when children and young people don't get answers from trusted authorities, especially their parents, the fact that they are quiet and they never asked you again does not mean that it is over. You can be happy, you can clap for yourself and feel, oh, I never got to answer that. Thankfully, they've never asked me again. But be sure they will go and look for that information elsewhere. Major source will be peers. Another source will be, and then now, of course, peers, they have had it from, you will find probably in a school, somebody has access to more information than children.
Mom, your meeting is
and
back
so
on.
they meet in school and they begin sharing this information. And most of the times, a lot of myths, a lot of untruths, and it's not clear. And once they feel they're getting now information, mom and dad look very archaic because they just they're not cool. They don't understand these things. So, and children are very nice. They keep an innocent face. They look at you, you're still mommy, they hug you, they're still daddy, they got at you and all that. But they will never possibly come back to you if you either shut them down or you did not answer them. They may come several times, but once they begin figuring this is not a source of information, they just naturally turn and begin looking for that information elsewhere. And so I knew that at the back of my mind. So it had taken a couple of months before I finally, I'm just praying that, God will give me this opportunity. At that point, I thought, he's a daughter. These are conversations my wife should be able to have with our daughter. But I mean, I knew why, I knew better. I was the wiser. So I decided I will have this conversation with her. So one day we were reading the Bible, okay? And we come to this section of the Bible, I can't remember what story it was, the Old Testament. It said, the virgin daughters of Jerusalem. And I was like, aha. I had actually read it earlier, for my just personal reflections. And I figured once I come in the evening, I'm going to read this same story and highlight. So, 2 things to pick. Dad, I have a boyfriend. Information can't come from your child to you. But you can also look for the opportunities and take the information to them. So it's not just waiting for information to pop up. That's great. you should also proactively look for opportunities to have these conversations at whatever right age. This time they were 6 and 4.5. And so I posed at virgin daughters, and we had taught them generally, when we read for you, any new word, ask us what it means. So naturally, and so I read, for some reason they didn't catch it. So I read slowly again, slowly, so that they don't miss it. So they got it. I said, Dad, what is virgin? And because I knew there's a question that had been asked earlier, that it takes what she had asked, if you have sex, will you be taken to juvenile? I said, a virgin is a girl who has never had sex. And then I paused for reaction. My 6-year-old was just like disappearing into her seat, just thinking, Dad, or did you just say that? Like, my 4.5 is very excited. She's younger, innocent. She's just like, yeah. So I asked, you guys know about sex? Said, my 4.5 said, yes, I know about sex. I know about sex. My 6-year-old is like, please, I mean, these are not things discussed. Again, I'm going through that thing of why is she not comfortable to tell me stuff, or why is she feeling shy about this? And so she said, yes, I know about sex. 4.5. I said, sex. Let me remember what she said. Sex is when a boy and a girl love each other forever, forever, forever. That's what she did. They sit on bed and they lock the door and then they kiss. And then they sit again, they stay, and then they kiss again. They said, yeah, that is sex. Thankfully, I didn't go on full throttle beginning to say, okay, now that you guys know sex, let me just now tell you what to do or not to do. Thankfully, God gave me the wisdom to ask, so what do you know about sex? And I knew my 4.5 knows up to the point. But if you're with me, she's describing a scene on screen, something that she had watched. Because I don't think she generated it from her head, that you go sit in a room and then you kiss and then you kiss again and you close the room. This definitely was something that she had watched. Now I need to tell you, when there was the digital migration in this country, from analog to digital, we took the excuse not to migrate. So we kept the TV box in the house, but we use it for just watching videos and anything that documentaries, whatever. But basically TV was over for us. We migrated as adults to our little screens. I catch my news on Twitter. I'm at par with any other person who's watching TV. So that was the end of TV in our house. So this is a child who does not have a TV in the house, but is describing a scene of screens that she has watched. So where did she watch it from? Naturally, of course, we visit with our friends, with relatives, and so, they interact with neighbors. And so all those options are possibilities. But just to say that even when you put good controls, children pick it up very easily. And so that's what happened. And so I began then from that point on, just for the interest of time, begin to have conversations about what is sex. I gave them the story of David and Bathsheba without opening up and beginning to say, no, this is exactly what happens. But what I did was to create an avenue of conversation so that at any point when they have any question, we can explore. Another little story that I will share is for my friends, part of our team of associate facilitators. They share this story when we ran Kizazi Kipya sessions. And they taught their children who are young then that no one should touch your susu, no one should look at it. It is private, and that protect it. God gave it to you, to protect it. But the young man had since observed. He must have been 6 then, if I'm not wrong. He must have observed. He had observed mom and dad shower together, because for that couple, it's just the habit. That's how they sort of spice up their marriage, which is fine. He said, "Mom, I've noticed you and Dad normally shower together. So do you look at each other's susu? As children are very straight up, they just tell you just like it is. And the mom, was shocked, number one, and said, no, we don't look at each other's susu. We shower with our underwear. Um, and I'm sure she was sweating. That conversation ended, and the boy's like, well, okay, that's fair enough. It's consistent with what you taught us. Dad comes in the evening and asks mom, as they're having conversations, and they're like, did you? So she shares with him. I just shared with our son. He asked me a very hard question, and I told him that we shower with our underwear on. And the dad was like, no, why did you lie to him? So takes the boy, they go into the bedroom, shut, and say, okay, there's a question you asked mom today. I don't want to answer it. I want to answer you. We actually shower naked. You know why? So he took the Bible, opened Genesis, and said, Adam and Eve, they were naked and had no shame. And so God allows, once a man and a woman come together in marriage, they are allowed to have no shame, to be naked, to see each other. That is the only place that it is allowed. But any other time, it's not allowed. And they discussed, he asked all the questions. There were more questions than that around, the sex, body parts and all. Boy comes, confronts mom, you lied to me. And mom had to eat humble pie and say, yes, I'm really sorry. She apologized. But from then on, they began now having very open conversations around this subject. And so, as you can see, children will always come to the adult in the house to ask questions. So from around that age 6 to 12, they are still really discovering, because now they've gone to school, especially from age 6, a lot of influences in the school, and they're influencing each other. By the time now they're into their teens, all this stuff began way, way, way before, in terms of just knowing or having ideas of what this is about. And hopefully, they have been answered by the right authority. So if you've never had a conversation with your child around sexuality, at maybe now they're in their teens, there's always a place to start. If you look at my story at the beginning, where I was sharing about, I have a boyfriend, Dad, I have a boyfriend, it is when you have unstructured time of engaging with them. You've heard, of course, of the thing of quality for children is quantity time. Quantity is what communicates quality to them. It's not like, now sit here, now let me sit here, now let's have this conversation. That works sometimes. But for the larger part, what we have seen is children's heart bubble out of what they have in their hearts if you are available. Now, like I shared in another forum, it's very easy to be available, to be present rather, but not available, because you're probably engaged. Because of these devices, you are engaged, you're not able to have time with your family. But if you just create time for things that you even enjoy, it could be a walk, or just go, like the other day we went out with our kids and played kati, because they're still young. Now she's 10 and the other one, and they are really jazzed. And those kinds of times, or play Scrabble, or play some game, or just hang out and just sit and just chat, tell them just stories of how you grew up. They love hearing that. They also love hearing how they were when they were young. And those provide opportunities to reconnect, especially now in COVID time. There's hopefully a lot of time to just, redeem what had been lost in the busyness of life. And so the big currency is relationship, time, and build, a one-on-one. Let me try and see if I'll be able to share my another dad was sharing to me a story. He had gone hiking. No, actually, they had gone jogging with his son. So that was a good time. They were spending time together. And then from nowhere, the son says, Dad, I have a question to ask from you. I said, yeah, just share with me. He said, what is sex? And the dad stopped, said he pulled the son aside. He was 8 years old. And they said, I'm going to tell you stuff that you should not tell your mom. At least that's what the dad told us in one of the sessions that we ran with parents. And he said, now, he explained everything from a biological perspective, how seed is transferred from male to female. And the boy seemed to, understand, and he was confirming. And what he noticed is the boy already had quite a bit of information. He just wanted to confirm. So by the time the question is coming, he already knows something about the subject of matter that he has brought before you. And so 2 weeks later, they were jogging again, and the boy says, now, Dad, I have another question. I said, okay, which question do you want to ask me? And says, there's something called semen. Was it semen during sex? And just a moment. And so the dad was shocked. He says he was unable to answer that question of the whole idea of semen. And so what he did was he said, I will go and Google it, and then I will come back. So we were now helping him Google by giving him tips of what to say to the child. And so we told him, just what you go and do, your son is, you already did the big job of explaining what is sex. So now go and explain from the perspective of what happens biologically and what is semen and all that. And so he went back. But again, all I'm pointing is those questions came because they were spending time together. So that is the ultimate. So build the relationship. If it had been broken, I want to encourage you that you can redeem it. There's something about teenagers. If I can just mention teenagers, because they're about 30% of the parents here. They can pretend not to listen. One of the questions that came is, one of the parents is saying, I'm having a conversation with a very disinterested audience. And it is just a ploy. Most of the times they are actually listening to you. But because they are trying to discover their independence, they always like feeling like they know everything. So getting new information from mom or from dad, for them is almost like, okay, it's new, but I wish I was ahead of your game. So they'll show you as well, but you trust, just they're listening. So don't shy from talking to them because you think they're not listening. Just be sure they're actually listening. So let me go through a couple of slides in the next 10 minutes, and then I'll pause, and then we'll have a conversation. Becky, is the slide you able to see?
No, not at all. Are you sharing it right now?
Yes.
No, it's the OneDrive isn't signed in. The OneDrive,
yes,
the drive hasn't been signed in, so we can't see.
Okay. I'll try and do that. I hope I'll be able to raise it. Sorry, we had a bit of a challenge earlier on, so we're not able to set this up earlier. So let me just try and look for. But either way, I'm able to still share without without the screen. Just give me a minute. So what you can do, maybe I'll open it up for questions. I can share the slides at the end, so that I figure out what to do with it. But in the meantime, let me just mention one little thing, and then I'll open it up for questions if you don't mind, so that we can begin the conversation, and then leave me 10 minutes at the end to wrap it up with the screens. But one of the things that, as I reflected and preparing for this session, is, and I felt I need to say this, is that sexuality is connected to our, it's connected to our relationship very intimately, and it's connected to God in a very intimate way. What do I mean by that? You remember when the woman who was caught in adultery, for those Christians, was brought to Jesus, there's something that Jesus did. Number one, she was brought. They said this woman was caught in the very act of it, and the Old Testament tells us we need to stone her. So you tell us. They were trying to trap Jesus because they needed to just deal with him. And so he told, he began writing something on the ground, and no one knows what he was writing. People have speculated that probably because he knows everybody's heart, he's probably writing names of things that people have done or sins people have done. And people began walking away. And he says, if anyone has not sinned, let him cast a stone. And then after that, everybody walked away and everybody left. And she was left alone with Jesus. And Jesus asked her, so where are your accusers? And she said, they're all gone. So no one is condemning you? No, no one is condemning you. So Jesus is like, okay, I also don't condemn you. But go and sin no more. So I just want to consider those two parts. If your child has already probably begun having sex, or has been exposed to pornography, or any of the things that you think are not right in the area of sexuality, wear the heart of Jesus. I don't condemn you either. But then there's a second part. Go and sin no more. And that could be a journey that you may have to walk with your son. In the course of the week, I was sharing, I was actually asking one of the dads who I know had an issue with their son around pornography. And the son had been using the devices in the house and somehow ended up stumbling into pornography. By the time they were catching it, it was, there was quite a bit of history. You could tell from the device. And so I've sort of kept tabs with him. And so I asked him, in the course of the week, how is it going? And if I was to answer a question on pornography, in fact, it has been asked, what should somebody do? How do you go about it? And I just want to read through his answers, which will be instructive because this is somebody who's actually doing it. He says, when you discover, don't express shock, handle it calmly. Number two, seek to find out as much info as you can. How did you get exposed? If they were introduced by someone, what else can you learn about the situation? Number three, explain to him the dangers of the vice and your commitment to help him. This is where I'm like, I'm not condemning you, but you need to stop this. Then the practical steps will be cut off exposure and any source, take it away. And here I want to also just read a scripture of how to deal with this whole idea of cut it off. And I'll read a story again about the heart of Jesus on children. So Matthew chapter 18 from verse 1, the disciples at that time came to Jesus saying, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, assuredly I say to you, unless you're converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. So just to tell you that God is very, very big on children, and he accepts them. So then you extend grace on them, but do what Jesus now commands them to do. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world. And here the world, you can think of media, you can think of any place where the source, when we narrow down to our conversation of sexuality, any source that brings information that shouldn't come to your child, consider that the world. So it is already known prior by, where it says, whoever causes one of these little ones to, who believe in me to sin, it would be better for them, for the millstone to be hung around the neck. Woe to the world because of offenses. Some versions render it as sin, because of sin. For offenses must come. So it is for a fact that they are with us. But woe to the man by whom the offense comes. So I pause here to ask, if your child is exposed in any kind of, sexualized content, might you be in any way complicit? Because if they access it through your device, or they access it through the environment that exists in the world, could you be, just a question, just think about it, because it says, woe to the person through whom that sin comes into the child. And so just being aware that we have a responsibility to protect. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into the everlasting fire. The parents who ask, so what do I do? There are radical things that you must do. The way I see it, Jesus does not deal with offenses or sins in a wishy-washy way. He is very precise, cut it off. So if it means withdrawing the privilege of those devices, cut it off. That's what it means, so that you do not become complicit with the people who bring content to your child. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. Of course, it didn't mean the physical one, but whatever it is, whether it's the channel through which that sexualization is happening, which brings sin, cut it out, deal with it. And I think this is what this parent was saying. You're saying practical steps is cut off exposure. So e.g., take away the phone or tab. Establish new rules of engagement, e.g., no phone or use internet in open spaces. This is a rule of thumb. If you have children who are already accessing tabs or screens of any kind, they should not access these screens in their rooms, because that's when they are in their privacy, they are accessing Wi-Fi. Then they have, the devil takes advantage from there, and they begin going into all kinds of things. So have a habit of them accessing the devices while you're there in the living room. Rarely will a person be, trying to go into the site they shouldn't go into. I remember when cyber cafes were coming and you go into town, and there always be those computers at the corner. I don't know if you remember. And if you go take a corner computer, most of the time you find, content popping up because guys have been watching porn. But the ones that are very close to where guys are walking in, no one dares. And this is just human behavior. So those are very physical things that you can actually do. Then deal with the root issue, is it bad company? And then you can now solicit for character building programs. There's a lot of programs that are around. He mentions here one of them, ROPS, and just especially if they're in their teens, and make sure that they have a positive environment within which they're able to be taught these things. As you seek to correct behavior, do it in a way that maintains the relationship. This is what he said, and this is something that he has done. So maintain that relationship, which means you're not cutting them out, you're dealing with the sin, but you're embracing them, just like Jesus said, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more. So you're dealing with, you will sin no more, but I don't condemn you, you're still mine. Then build the relationship, as this keeps open the door for you to influence them. So let me pause there, Becky, and allow for just reactions, conversations, any questions. I have to mention here that I invited some of my friends who work with young people, and so I may be deflecting 1 or 2 questions, because I completely believe in Kijiji, this idea that wisdom, all of us have a measure of wisdom. When we bring it together in the village square, so to speak, then we are able to come up with a rich. So go ahead, Becky.
All Thank you. Is there anyone who has seen that said no to unsupervised screen times where internet is activated? Feel free to share your questions as well. There are some couple of questions that we did, but allow me to do the poll yet again to see there are some people who aren't here. So please bear with us even as we do that. As we are doing that, please send us your questions and we will be glad to answer them. All right. Is there anyone with a burning question right now? They can just put their mic on and ask. In the meantime, please take some time and help us know you better. Also, Kiteto, you've reminded me that I saw somewhere that you have an amazing discount for the parents who have just attended this webinar. Would you like to share some bit about that?
Yes, we'll be rolling out Kizazi Kipya in early September, and we're going to be giving a 50% discount. It explores all the things that we're saying from looking at the Kijiji model. Those are some of the slides that I hope to share, and looking at all the stakeholders that are involved in you raising your child and what you can do with them very practically. Then we'll look at you as the parent as a coach, and what can you do to bring out 5 things. The main one that I'll talk about today will be character, and then competence, that will be their talents, their skills, their abilities, connections, which is being touted right now to be the skills that you need in the 21st century, and especially now we are into the digital space. What you need is this whole thing of emotional intelligence, being able to connect with people, the people skills. What can you do very practically at home to prepare your children to succeed? And then confidence, which is born out of your identity, and just how do you help a child be confident in life? And then compassion, just thinking about others, and wrapping all these up. So that's what the program is about. So in September, we'll be doing a 50% discount of the program that we run. When we run it directly and not through other proxies, it normally costs between 20 and 25,000. But we want to give it, and that's for, we normally think of 2 people, that's a couple. And so we want to still offer it for the couple. For the single parents, we encourage you to come with somebody else. And so we'll offer it for half the price. So that'll be like 12,500 from September. So if you register today with just send it to Becky, we're able to pick you up, and then we'll communicate with you when we're just about to start. So that's as far as Kizazi Kipya is concerned. As I said, it takes a village. We don't do everything. So I went back to where I used to work and asked, the executive officer, Timothy Madeka, he's here in this forum. There's a book that we used to use and is still in use now called The Talk. It is being sold at a very subsidized price. Timothy can explain. I think it's 500 for this session. And so get in touch with Tanari Trust. You can just Google them up on Facebook and chat them up to be able to pick your information. And then for pornographic, and if your child is in that area, I talked to one of the foremost guys who has really opened up their lives and shared, called Ernest Wamboe. He runs, I think, his organization is called Pen Strokes. Pen Strokes. Again, if you Google Pen Strokes, he was very gracious, gave us his book, Lust and the City, for free. And so if you send your email, you will be able to get those resources to your inbox. And then there's a Catholic father, because I reached out wide and we work with many stakeholders. He sent some documents of with different themes around family matters. So again, you'll be interested to go through and read. Again, you'll access that from Becky. And so those are some of the resources that have come through as we prepared for this session, Becky.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. email addresses to enable us to share those resources with you. There's someone who has asked, how
Yeah.
should we tackle the normalization of homosexuality in popular culture? Liberal ideology is very aggressive in painting the Christian position on this matter as homophobic or intolerant. How would you respond to that?
Culture is a subject that I am very passionate about. And I like St. Augustine's description of what culture is. St. Augustine is a philosopher, theologian, was also an African, just so you know. And he's one of the guys who really helped even in the Christian faith. The doctrine of the Trinity is attributed to some of the thoughts that St. Augustine brought. So one of the things that he says is culture is the outworking of a people's creed, CREED. In other words, culture is the outworking of a people's faith. So when you begin seeing how people are behaving, it is because of what they believe. So you behave what you believe. There's a writer who also wrote in the around 1940s. He was a Harvard sociologist called Carl Zimmerman. You can also Google him up. He was not necessarily a religious guy, but a sociologist, anthropologist. They actually describe him as a sociologist. Carl Zimmerman wrote a book on family and civilization. And he was looking at Roman civilization and the Greek civilization. And he noted that at the brink of collapse, they had both become very liberal, the kind of things that that question is asking. The divorce rate was really high. Sexuality was very liberal. Gayism and lesbianism, it's not a new phenomenon, by the way, it's been there, even in the Bible, it's been there, had also become very prevalent. When you begin seeing those kinds of things in the society is about to reach collapse. And he proved it by looking at the Roman Empire and looking at the Greek Empire. At this point, he was writing, predicting how the US was going. This is in the 40s. And he's saying, if you continue on like this, when you lose cohesion, when you lose that Kijiji feeling, when you lose the feeling of, I have somebody who checks me, then you begin collapsing in the middle, you cave in, and then you disappear. And so Carl Zimmerman attributed that when people do that, it is because he also said it's because they have lost faith. So when you read Carl Zimmerman and the thing that he talks about, I can actually just read because I was looking at it even today in the morning. It is very interesting that he looks at several things that describe a society that is now going, close to, to the brink of collapse. And when you read it, it almost sounds like Timothy, 2 Timothy 3, that people will become lovers of themselves, lovers of money, insolent. They shun authority. They all those things, which is what we are experiencing a lot. And so, if I got your question, say it again. Was that a question?
No, not really.
All right. So when you see all these things, I would say it is because you have lost faith. And so the thing to go back to is, where is your faith anchored? That which you believe. Now, in our culture, we talk a lot, we love talking about this word values. Values, 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 values. But let me tell you this, values don't stand on themselves. When you have the value of respect or honesty or any of the values that you can think about, they are normally built on the foundation of belief. You must believe in something for you to hold that value dear. So when you see people say, you need to be tolerant, you need to be all those things that they say, especially around, the whole LGBT conversation, it is because they have their faith on something else. Their belief shifted long ago. And so for us as Christians is to ask that the root in our tree be the faith in Jesus, the faith in the, I even like saying the philosophy of Jesus, and therefore you'll be able then to look at life from the right lens, because it's a worldview issue, more than it is just whether are you tolerant or not. And just like I said, at no point does Jesus say, I condemn you. He says, just like the woman caught in adultery, I don't condemn you either, but go and sin no more. So it's very clear in terms of how God does it. I don't know whether I've answered, Becky.
Yes, you have. I believe you have. There's also another question that has come in. If a child under 4 years likes to touch their private parts, what should a parent say to their child?
All right, so there's a developmental stage that comes where they are beginning to discover. Like I said, when they're very young, don't rush to condemn or to clamp them.
This one.
What you need to do is to relax. There's an age that comes where they actually are experimenting. They are beginning to discover their sexuality. They get very curious even about other children's private parts. Just last night, our daughter was 3 years old, was telling us, boys susu like this, and she was demonstrating to us. And then we asked her, how do girls do? No, girls sit. And they just discover it. And then it's also, you might also find that they will also show each other their private parts, and the parents just go nuts. But all of it is normally, hey, I'm in this big world, it looks interesting, there's new things I'm discovering, so they're in the process of discovery. It will pass. What you need to be afraid is if they have been exposed. That is what you do, either mostly by domestic workers or older siblings or that older cousin or neighbor that you stay with. If that touching of that private part is coming from a possible exposure, then there's need to get worried. But if it's just part of discovering, it's a phase that passes, and so nothing to worry about.
Steve, can someone be born gay?
Now, I've not fully researched. I should do like the parent who said, let me go and research on that one. But I mean, the problem in the world, if you understand it from a sin perspective, where in the Garden of Eden, when Adam sinned, a lot of things just went haywire, including what we see as disease, disorders, anything that is not towards perfect, you can attribute it to sin. Now, that does not excuse people to say, now I will sin, or now because I have tendencies to steal, I will be stealing and it's okay. So I know, well, I don't know somebody, but a friend of mine was sharing with me that one of his friends has an attraction to the opposite sex. And so there's a whole big argument. Is it born or not born? For me, it doesn't really matter. As long as there are boundaries that we have been given within which to live. And just like, I'm trying to get a good example where you don't give yourself an excuse just because that's how you are born. The Bible is very clear. So the practice of it and the expression of it is what is sin. Just like we are all tempted by all kinds of things. And so it is not the feeling of how you're feeling, it is about, did you do it? And then Jesus raises the bar when it comes to sexuality. He says, if you look lustfully, then you have committed adultery in your heart. So a lot of those things are to be brought under the lordship of Jesus Christ, because he is able to walk with us in whatever journey. So I think there's a big debate on born or not born, and there's strong arguments on both sides. So That's what I would say. What I would be concerned about is it causing you to sin? And if it's about sin, then you need to cut it off in terms of, stop sinning.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. The next question, we will ask it in two parts. Number one, how can you control the teens with gadgets in their bedrooms if they have older brothers who use their gadgets like that? And a concern about social platforms like TikTok. Any advice on how best to approach this with our teens?
The question of devices, media, it's a double-edged sword. You can go into the devices. I like saying production versus consumption. I am committed to training my children to production so that any content that is streaming through in the schools we have will cause them to produce. Right now, we picked some guitar lessons. So I'll put the tab in front, but the content that is coming to them is something that will help them learn how to play the guitar. We're using the same device, we're using Wi-Fi, everything. And so I would put one step back to ask, when your children consume the content they are consuming, are they becoming producers or are they becoming consumers? And so you need to ask yourself that question. And then when it comes to devices that are being used by the older versus the younger, I would say, if you have trained the older ones to handle responsibly this content, and you're sure, then I would see no problem in them being able to control the younger ones in handling. So the question is whether you are confident that you have actually trained them to access the right content and whether that content is building. But I have to give a caution here. There is an age must be protected. And what I mean by that is, like, I'll give you a little story. When I was about, I must have been 4. I remember because we were in a different house. Then we moved when I was 6 years old. So it must have been I was 4 or 5. I walked close to mother hen, which had chicks, and boy, did I get like attacked. It left me with trauma to the point that when my mom asked me to go and, catch a chicken, slaughter for the family to have dinner, I was completely traumatized. I never wanted to come near a chicken, just a mere chicken. This is a boy who's fearing chicken. And the reason is there's a lesson to learn there. There is a time to fiercely, I'll repeat, fiercely protect your children. Humans are the ones who are only known to have very nice walls and very nice gates, but completely open all kinds of predators through the screen from a very tender age. So I would say up to maybe age 12, fiercely protect the children by not even having these devices. They only have them for that half an hour, 1 hour, or 2 hours, do the assignment or something that you approve of, and then that's it. And then as they grow older, after you have trained them, just like you see the lioness and the cubs, when they are beginning to play, cheetahs, they will even migrate and take the cubs and move to a different location because there's a predator. And then eventually they'll be releasing them, they'll be killing small rabbits and coming back to mother cheetah or the lioness. Then eventually
Is it me or is it Steve? it me or is it Steve? All right.
It's all of us.
All right. As we wait for Kiteto to reconnect, there are some resources that have been shared. There is one, and now that Timothy is here, Timothy, do you mind telling us a bit more about the talk? Timothy from Tanari.
Yes, Becky. Hi, Becky.
Timothy.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Hi, Becky. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you, Becky, for the opportunity. Maybe just to share in a very short thing, is that the book which I've already shared there. My apologies for the bad background. Is that the book is for teenagers. We call it The Talk. We created it specifically on how to help parents to engage with their children concerning this area of sexuality, to come up with conversations on how best they can be able to engage their young children, especially on this area of sexuality. So the book is called The Talk. We have contextualized it. It was done by the CPR Inc., which is Creating Positive Relationship, which we are an associate member. We have contextualized it to the Kenyan context. Hence, that's why we also wanted to share it as a tool which you can use as parents when you engage with the book. The book, the link will be shared. I've shared it with Becky, so it will be shared to the larger group as parents, and you can get in touch with us from that perspective, and you can be able to buy a copy for yourselves to engage with your children. Thank you so much, Becky.
What is the age of your children?
Sorry about that. Mofoi is also here, and he is one of the best youth workers I have interacted with so far. And Mofoi, could you please tell us, based on your interaction with these young people, do these guys actually ask you questions? Do they ask you questions about sexuality, or do you have to go to them and start this conversation? Mofoi?
Yes. Hi. My name is Mofoi Kilonzo.
Hi.
I have worked both under Timothy at Tanari Trust and Steve Kiteto. Is the network clear? I hope so. Yeah, as a youth worker,
yes,
you find
it is.
As a youth worker, you find these questions do come up more for us in a camp setting, because in a camp setting you have an extended period of time with them, and particularly you can find many moments of vulnerability in that particular setting, rather than when we're having interactions, say in a church setup. But they do come up. I love some of the statistics that have been shared. If I just quickly look at the YouTube, you mentioned, I think 4 out of 10, Becky?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned 4 out of 10 girls and 5 out of 10 boys aged 13 to 19. And really, that's the age group that we work with, teenagers, sexually active. And I'd like to suggest that if those are the ones who are sexually active, perhaps there's a much larger percent of the population. We like to think of it from about 90 to 95% of the teenage population that has interacted with pornography in one form or another. Pornography being defined as any material that is created simply for the purpose of arousal. So we know that this is the reality, and we have those conversations. But I'd like to suggest that, especially in the home, this is really where it needs to start from. I've had some questions even on stuff like homosexuality. Some of the really good resources out there, I sent one to Becky on the private message, but please check out fightthenewdrug.org. Perhaps it can be shared to you guys widely. fantastic website. Another amazing book that really helped us understand pornography and all its implications. There's a really nice book called The Porn Myth, which you can find on Amazon. Parents, we just need to equip ourselves. And even as youth workers, we just need to equip ourselves because these are the things that are coming up. One of the things that you realize as a youth worker also is that the religious argument sometimes is shut down very quickly. When you start talking about this is what the Bible says and why it says, it's shut down very quickly. But what these guys are doing with Fight the New Drug and in the Porn Myth, they've actually carried out what you can call like a secular studies or compiled secular studies. So just information on how it affects the brain, how it affects development, particularly with regards to relating with one another, and just the long-term implications. And it is now being treated as a drug, similar to many of the substances that are widely abused by our youth today, because studies have begun to show that it does change the way your brain operates. So amazing content that you can find online. One of the other books that was shared with me with a friend who experiences same-sex attraction. And this is one of the things that we have now begun to deal with. I think it was there, it just wasn't discussed widely, but I think with our entertainment the way it is, this is something that we probably need to begin to look at as church and as family. So if you guys can find a book called Is God Anti-Gay by Sam Alberry. Sam Alberry is a theologian. He's an apologist working under Ravi Zacharias Ministries, but he's a man who has also experienced same-sex attraction, who experiences rather same-sex attraction. And he says something that is pretty interesting, I found pretty interesting. He says, it sounds clunky to describe myself as someone who experiences same-sex attraction rather than gay, but describing myself like this is a way for me to recognize that the kind of sexual attraction I experience are not fundamental to my identity. They are part of what I feel, but not who I am in a fundamental sense. I am far more than my sexuality. So just trying to help young people understand that they are far much more than their sexuality. I think the world is trying to box them into these labels. Maybe this is something you're experiencing, so you are gay. No, Sam Alberry is trying to demystify this. And I've also heard Steve talk about it a little. We might feel like we want to do something, but it doesn't make it necessarily right. But also it doesn't make it who we are. Just because I want to steal is the exact thing that he says. That's because I feel like stealing doesn't mean I should. Yeah, so as youth workers, these are challenges that we are facing. Amazing resources. I'm glad my former and forever boss Steve is here. Tonari Trust has some good resources, an amazing program they run called CPR, Creating Positive Relationships, just trying to help young people understand the parts of their sexuality, the physical, emotional, mental, social, but above all, the spiritual aspect of their sexuality. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. This is such an amazing forum. Forgive me for the corona here, but thank you so much for this opportunity. If there are any more questions, please feel free to throw them around and we can possibly just try and demystify or shed some light on some of the things that we are facing as young people and as parents. Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, there's also another book called Gay Girl.
Good God.
Good Gay Girl, Good God.
Good God.
Good
Amazing,
God, Gay
amazing
Girl.
book. Yeah.
Yes, it's an amazing resource as well. I'd like to put someone else on the spot. Reverend Pala is here with us. And I'd like him to answer this question for us. There's someone who recently discovered that their daughter is making lesbian posts on Instagram. And could you advise how best to handle it without condemning her?
Yeah, thanks, Becky, for the invite. It's nice to see all of you people and to have conversations on sexuality. maybe to just respond on that question, I will say that I think conversations on sexuality with the young people begin by parents being honest about their feelings concerning those particular areas, and also being genuine as they seek to address or have conversations with their children, so that teenagers can read. They can read. They can read condemnation, you know, and so it's not what you want to say or what you want to comment about what the kid is doing, but rather how you are going to bring out that issue. And so I think for that particular parent is to sit down with their daughter and express their genuine feelings about their kids posting lesbian photos on Instagram, and sort of also bring out the why are they having those concerns, right? And that's the place where an opportunity to point them to values, like these are our values, but what you're doing goes against those values. And then to also give them an opportunity to express why they are doing that. What is the source? Are they doing that because their peers are doing it? Are they doing that because they have those sexuality tendencies? They have tendencies towards lesbianism, and to have that, to create that space where the young girl can express themselves honestly without feeling judged. And I think when parents are genuine and the environment is not judgy, as teens like to put it, then it gives them an opportunity to just express themselves honestly. And so you have this place where you have an opportunity to speak values, and the kids also have to be honest about what they are feeling, and then have a genuine conversation. And I think it's from a genuine conversation that you can also, the parent has an opportunity to, let me use the words, make things right, okay? And it should not be a one-time conversation. A lot of times a parent will think that just having a one-time sit down, all right, could sort so many things, but it is a conversation that needs to continue. Get to know, where did it start? What are they feeling about what you talked about, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks down the line, all right? And so you enter into this process of clarifying values. I think for teenagers, every time we talk to them, we should talk to them like we are doing it for the first time, all right? And not say, you remember, we talked about, no, you say it as if you've just begun the conversation again, all right? And so when that happens time and time again, you are able to help them redefine their values, and therefore get to this place where God really wants them. Yeah, that is what I will say. So have conversations within an environment that's not judgy. Get to know them. Why are they doing that? What has led to that? And then help them just clarify their values. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Reverend Pala. Mofoi has given us a quote that there are things worse than an awkward conversation with your child. He also says that Matt Freud, the author of the Porn Myth, said kids are so afraid to talk to their parents because they think their parents will think differently of them. So these conversations are, yes, Pala?
Okay. Just to add something, all right? 2 weeks ago, I was having a conversation with young people. We called it sex conversations. And one of the things that we asked these were like 13 to 18-year-olds, and just asking them, who is one person you would like to talk to you about matter sex? And all of them, they said their parents. Only that, like over 50% said that they will prefer their moms. Okay, I don't know why dads were. All right. So I hear what you're saying. I think parents still hold the power of influencing their children's thoughts about on matters sexuality. So parents, you have the power. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Kiteto, glad to have you back. Yes, please take over.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Like I said, I mean, I am a strong believer in it takes a village, and I call it a village conversation right from the word go. I don't know whether Mugeshi has shared anything, but just to say what Pala is talking about, there was a study in 2010 that was talking about 7 to 19-year-olds would love their parents to actually speak to them about matters of sexuality, but they don't. This was a study done in Kenya. And I want to allay just something that I think the reason why, when I was talking to my wife, at some point asking her, do you feel funny? Like I told her, I actually feel funny saying vagina. Like for me, it just doesn't sit very well. Strange. She also had a problem saying penis. And we sat and wondered, so what's going on? So we discovered, when you look back, just how we grew up, whether in the estate or in your community, wherever you grew up, there's just a way sex was painted. From an African culture perspective, it was a very private thing. And this is just to help parents to relax. If you're struggling, don't worry. You are very normal. And the reason you're normal is because if, for example, right now, try and think of what is penis in your mother tongue. Just try that. Just think about it. Do you have a word for it? Or vagina? When I try and play it in my head, in my language, the closest it comes to, and I can't even say it in English because I don't think there's a word for it in English. I'll say it in Swahili, is kakitu. Something. That is what a penis is in my language. Just to tell you that these are not things that were discussed. They used to be preserved during rites of passage. That's why that older auntie, that uncle, that mentor who would speak to our children about sexuality. And there was such little information streaming through, you could be rest assured to wait until the children turn into adults for you to begin having. But now when my daughter is asking me, I have a boyfriend at age 3, and age 5, they're already saying, okay, if you have sex, you will be taken to juvenile. Those conversations cannot be had anymore by those mentors that you're thinking about. It is the parent who has to deal with your own cultural wiring and have it rewired. And the way to rewire it is to have a healthy view of sex yourself, the way God looks at it, which is, it's a beautiful thing. He created man and woman. They were both naked. They had no shame. And then begin journeying from there. And then I like what Pala has said. You have to, I'll use a big word for nothing, incarnate. Incarnate, basically, we use it when you're doing camping out there, because we're camping and all, is when you come down from your level, like Jesus did, and come to the level of the child, and then begin listening. Your greatest skill is to ask questions, open-ended questions, and then be quiet and listen. In some cases, be the fool. Just ask them, okay, so what are you guys listening to nowadays? Who's the musician? Who's the, once teens begin feeling validated, and they feel validated when their ideas are listened to, even when you initially at the impulse don't agree with their ideas, just listen and then pose questions and say, okay, you said this, what about this? Then they think again, and you're helping them arrive at what do I really believe in, and you're able to point contradictions from what they're saying. But if you come down and clamp and say, no, that is not what we do, then you've actually lost them. Teenagers love being validated by being listened to. And so, and even I've seen the youth workers who thrive the most are those that just give an ear, they're just seemingly hanging out, but they know when to ask a difficult question that will spin this young person. By the time they come back, they're like, that question you asked me, I've been thinking about it, because now you're helping them form their worldview and concretize. Any other question?
Yes, there's a question here. Is it possible for a teenager to change their gay tendencies? Are there real testimonies of that?
All right, Mugeshi, you want to attempt, or Mufoy?
Hi, Steve.
Hey.
I think for me, I have a testimony of that happening. Hi everyone. I'm Mugeshi. I work at Deliverance Church Umoja. I'm a youth minister there. And we have a program that we run for ex-cans, guys who finished Form 4. And when these guys are coming in, at least I can say like 70 or 80% of them are not born again, and they are battling with these sexuality questions. And I've seen at least twice or thrice where we have a young person who is battling with gay tendencies. And as we were talking, and I think we tackled the issue of if your child comes and tells you that they are gay, what are you going to do about it? And I think we tackled it really well, just to walk with the person. And I think that's one of the things that have happened. There's a year, I think it was 2015, we had a young girl who was battling with such tendencies. And I think what really helped was just walking with her and tackling the questions and being intentionally there for her, not just telling her this is wrong, this is what the Bible says, just finding out why are you feeling that way, where has this come from, how can you walk through these feelings that you're feeling, and what now after that, that's when you can now bring in what does the Bible say about this, and just genuinely show them I love you, but now these are the things that you can apply so that you can be able to understand. Just it's like, what can I say? It's like recreational pathways. You know, it's like just bringing in something different. Change comes with time. It comes with time. So just recreating those neural pathways, and then with time, it gets into their heart. Then they themselves ask themselves questions. I always tell parents, there's one thing teenagers are more afraid of than being beaten. It's feeling foolish. So that's why I think the book is even called The Talk. So just talking to them asking questions, you answering, you asking questions, answering. So it's a conversation, just helping those neural pathways. And this time, that child, the girl, is now working and born again and working in ministry. So there are great things out there.
Maybe I can just add a little. Sam Albright in his book mentions that the first thing we should do is thank them just for opening up. I think as long as young people are opening up, we are in a good place. At the point that they stop talking, that's when we get worried. So the first thing that we should do is just thank them for opening up, and don't make them feel condemned. The second thing he mentions is listening. And he says you need to listen carefully. Experiences with same-sex attraction vary enormously. points of sensitivity, triggers for temptation or despair. The issues surrounding and feeding into the feelings of attraction differ enormously from person to person. So just try and understand what exactly are they going through. I think just highlighting those two things, if you encounter such a situation. Having worked in youth ministry, particularly out of Kenya, I have encountered guys who are even in ministry, and this is a struggle. I began to understand it as it's similar to the same way some of us struggle with money issues, or some of us, we look at women or men. So it is a struggle for some. For some, it is a struggle that will be lifelong. Like Sam Alberry talks about, his struggle it's not that it disappears. You just learn how to walk closer with God. Yeah, so two things I'd like to mention. If you have a young person, ever encounter a young person in that situation, thank them. And number two, listen very carefully, just to understand what they're going through. Don't make assumptions.
Yeah, and also that book that Wallace has just texted, Gay Girl, Gay,
Girl,
that
good
one.
God.
That one by Jackie Hill Perry is a personal testimony of herself, and giving a story and just redefining what that life looked like.
And I think we will compile all those resources when the parents give their emails. We'll send one package to them for all these resources, for them to be able to, read for themselves.
Yeah, is there anyone else with a question? There is none other that has come in. Anyone who feels like there's something we need to clarify? That reminds me, there's someone, Steve, who wanted to find out. At the beginning, you had mentioned something about remedial steps. Do you mind going through that again?
I wish I'm able to remember, but the idea for me, I must have been mentioning that that Jesus Christ is a redeemer, and redemption basically is now, yes, you fell, but there is a pathway back to stability. I don't know whether that I'm answering that person, but that's probably the idea that I had at the back of my mind. When you have realized that your child has strayed, in the sense that they have actually, maybe they've watched porn, or they are sexually active, or in this case, they have, tendencies towards opposite sex, whatever the situation that landed them there, or any other thing that you might consider offensive to you. What I am instructed by is the prodigal son. So the father, that's the heart of the father, and it mirrors God. That guy had completely left the house, home, went to a city, squandered all his money. We know the story. Came back, and and somebody mentioned it here. It is the idea of loving the person for who they are, not what they have done. And by the way, that is across the board, even for relationships of spousal relationships. If you begin loving your spouse for just who they are the daughter of God, and they are your precious wife, period. What they have done is inconsequential. It's very hard for a human being, and that is the place of prayer. You cannot do it by your own strength successfully. One of the things that I can tell you is God is more interested in your child than you are. And in the scripture that I had read, where I was talking about cut it off, if anyone causes these little ones to sin, if you continue reading, it is in Matthew chapter 18, verse 1 to 9. Towards the end there, verse 9, it says, God has assigned an angel who looks at the face of God for your child. That is how serious he is. And so in terms of remedial or redemption, just know that you have great backup from God, and you have to mirror the image of God to your child and He is a God who is who accepts you back despite what you have done, not because of what you've done or not, but because of who you are. You are His. You know, that thing of this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. So the thing here is the identity. You're mine. So you cannot run away from this. So I hope it answers that. That was the concept I was trying to communicate. That whatever they've done, but you will, I guarantee you, you will feel deficient in being able to be that unconditional in terms of giving love. And that is the space of God. So you have to pray and ask God to walk this thing with you. That is the only way. It's a very high calling in terms of, as human beings, being able to love somebody unconditionally unless God helps you. And so that's an invitation to completely partner with God in this.
Remind us, what is the earliest age that we can introduce the sex talk, and how do we do that?
All right, so I distinguish sex and sexuality. Sexuality is about body anatomy, body parts, and gender differences, boy, girl, and just the differences in how God has designed our bodies in a very simple way of explaining what sexuality is. So if you start with sexuality, you are safer, because when you begin telling your 3-year-old, now hold this, wash yourself, I'll walk away so that you can wash yourself. After, of course, you've trained them, and lock this door, because no one should see your private parts, no one should touch. And I like what Paula said in terms of always introduce that conversation like it's new. Tell them again and again. So once they begin learning that there's some boundaries, including when we have these conversations about sex and sexuality, they are private for us as a family. They're not things you go discussing with your friends in terms of, oh, my mom and dad told me this. So the textbook answer is 0 to 5, you're doing sexuality. From 6, you will have to answer the question of what is sex, because they'll have already interacted with it more often than not because of school. Now, here's a disclaimer. You have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, they're in the same house, they sleep in the same room. You're having this conversation, or she's discovering or he is discovering things around sex, and this 4-year-old is very attentive to listen. I think I've had that. Then there's a situation of you have to now bring down the conversation to their level. So for me, it is not when do I start. The moment the child is able to say this is a cup, here this is a cup, they should begin learning what are the parts of the body. And then as you go into your 6 years, 7, 8, I always say, if your child who is between 6 and 9 and has not asked you about sex, be very wary, because they are learning from somewhere. The fact that they haven't asked you does not mean that they are just innocent, they don't know. And so that, I would say, is an age that you need to, but you have help in a big manual called the Bible, and use all kinds of stories. The other way you can use is recently, when must have been last year, my daughter was 9, the other one was 6.5. Our neighbors kept dogs, our neighbors then, and the dogs were mating. I was like, fantastic opportunity. I was like, so what do you think is going on? Oh, we don't know, maybe the other dog is trying to kill the other one. I was like, no, that's called mating. And what happens is there'll be sperm that will be transferred to the other female dog, and then then eventually you get puppies. And sure enough, puppies came. That's fantastic opportunity to just escalate this conversation. But like I say, and I keep going back, and you can go, I've written 2 articles there on Kizazi Kipya Facebook page. You have to deal first with your viruses in your head because of how we grew up. I know we grew up in Kenya, so we know how we think about sex. That is the first place to break down those walls and then be easy. Children are so trusting. They are so trusting to the point that whatever you tell them, they completely believe. And God is very keen to connect them. I'll tell you a story. It's not sexuality related. My wife is working out with two girls then. They must have been around 4 and maybe 2.5, and they had gone for Bible study fellowship somewhere in Parklands Baptist. University of Nairobi rioted, and everybody was running out of town, scampering out of town, and they were going to catch a matatu, and everybody's running helter skelter. It's chaotic. My wife is getting worried. I have these small kids, and I need to find my way home. Then my 4-year-old tags her hand and says, "Mom, let's pray, because God is able to sort us in this." And Mom is thinking, this is not the time to pray. We need to run. I mean, and she made a quick prayer. I said, "God, please bring us a matatu, because we need to go home and everybody is running up and down." A matatu came from nowhere. It crossed and passed everyone who wanted to, jump into it, and stopped right in front of them. The conductor opened the door, they got in, and then he shut the door and it drove off with them. And there's no one else in the matatu, just that's her and the children. And why I'm sharing that is to say that when we introduce them to their maker, God has more intention to even work with them than you think. And so your work is just to connect them. Better if you're able to mirror the image of God to them by your actions, by everything that we've been talking about. Be authentic in your communication, be real, and then explain things in God's perspective of design. You'll always never go wrong in terms of just working. This is how things are designed. There's a designer who designed how this life works.
Thank you, Steve. The next question, I think this is the last question we will answer. We will try, if you have any other question, you can please send them to me via email. My email address is becky@karuracc.or.ke, and we will try to get you the appropriate answer for your question. But before then, the last one we will answer in 2 parts. To young boys, who is best placed to introduce the topic? Is it the mom or the dad, or both? And then, are there any unique considerations for having the talk in a context of single parenting?
Yeah, those are very good questions. There is no hard and fast in this era in terms of who is best placed. Whereas I thought mom is best placed to talk to our daughters about sex, I'm the one who ended up talking to them about it. And so it may well be that either of you could start the conversation. But what I will be keen to point out is you have to forge a common front so that it doesn't seem like these conversations, this is the only go-to place. Only mom is able to answer this. Only dad is able to answer this. It needs to be that at all points, try and work as a common front. One of you most likely will be easier around the subject, so you have help there. But I think as the boy grows older, if I just recall my own experience, I happen to have, I think, a dad was very ahead of his time in terms of just sharing when I look back, because I remember him explaining to me stuff like, when you're sick, your penis will not be able to, fill in blood when you wake up, because a boy wakes up and you find that he has like an erection, a heart. And it's just the body, the way it is created. And so those conversations are very easy to have. Even man can have those conversations. But I think when I received it from my dad, I was like, oh, okay. And he said, when you're sick, you will not be able to have like an erection because your body is not functioning well. Then, he told me stuff that when I look back, I'm like, okay, he's not even quite ahead. It's like, when you look at your balls, like, your scrotum and everything, one is smaller, one is bigger. I'm like, oh, okay. That's very interesting. So all that is sexuality, because you're just looking at the body. So who should answer the questions? I think either. But if the man of the house is there, better. But if the man of the house is not switched on, mom, don't wait until he wakes up. Start the conversation as you're also trying to woo him to, sort of get him into the conversation. Single moms, a lot of the conversation you have to hold by yourself, but you need to look for a trusted authority, and I know single moms who've done this. They have linked up with that sports coach, the football coach, or they've linked up with that youth worker like Pala here, or they've linked up with an older brother who is trusted. The thing is not to trust blindly, because even your sibling, you just don't know when they went to college what happened. You just don't know what they're smoking. So what you want is to have a very trusted person who you know is able to engage in this conversation. And you can start, because sexuality is easy. There's always a certain level you can go. You can teach them how to treat a lady. This is not how to do it. This is just the way, by interacting with you, they understand if they're a boy. But then you can begin saying, now, Uncle so-and-so, we'll have some conversations about you, but you need to spend time with that uncle or older cousin or that trusted authority to thrash through what they're actually going to tell your son, so that you are sure the information that's going to come to them is information that is solid. If you want to debrief, fine. But there is such a thing as masculinity calling out masculinity. So, look for, and hopefully you have time for an older male who's able to direct your son in those matters. As you debrief on the side, doesn't mean you cut off conversation completely. There'll always be questions, because you are the go-to authority for them. So that's how I put it. Unmute, Becky.
Sorry. The question that we were addressing today is parenting in a sexualized world. Now, in the era of gengeton and the soft porn, reading books, the different shades of gray, 50 shades of gray, we have become so complacent with what pornography is at that particular sense. So how do we counter the trending sexuality culture with the heavy influence of media and the influence it has on young people, and how do we just deal with that problem? The culture that is here, which is the sexuality culture, and that is seemingly relatable to them. These kids love gengeton and all this. So how do we deal with that? How do we parent in a sexualized world, in a nutshell?
Yeah. So the context, the big world is that sexualized world, the cultural context. And then if you imagine it as a concentric circle, the inner circle is content that streams through from the cultural context to your child. So cultural context, content is streaming through. Now what you need to do as a parent is to put controls. That's an inner circle. So controls at different ages will look different. Just the same way you have controls of a wall around your house, you have a door, you have a gate, device controls, controlling who they're hanging out with as they are younger, growing older. So just being in control. Those are control of things out, coming in. Then in the core, that smaller circle is character. Now, that is where you need to spend the bulk of your time doing. Just like that story of, do you want to interact with the fake notes and understand so many fake notes and try and chase all of them and try and see which one is fake or genuine? So concentrate on genuine so that they're able to know what is fake. So for example, what we are doing even with our children is we begin asking them, because we have taken time to input character based on the scripture and the word of God, and breaking down what it means and strengthening, that is like inside out. Okay, so let me just pause there and say, so character is doing inside out, controls are protecting from outside in. So there is a case for controls, but the bigger case is for the character. So then as they have character, you can involve them in critical thinking. were running a program not too long ago, and one of the things we're asking them, give us the music that you listen to. And they downloaded the music, we're looking at the words. Okay, let's go through the words and see, what do you think this musician is saying? I was like, okay. Even when I listen to, because some of them had downloaded Bongo, Gengi and all, and we're trying to listen to what are they saying. They are realizing they're actually saying that, you should go and sleep with this one, and if you don't like this one, there's a song by, I think, Diamond. And so they began realizing, those are 18-year-olds, they began realizing, wait, this person is actually talking about, sleeping around, doing this over and over again. So when you begin to help them to think, that is now you're building critical thinking. And that can come as probably from around age 8. We say from 7 is age of reason, 8, 9, depending on what they're listening to and how much they're exposed, is to begin building the muscle of helping them have the right world view, the lens through which they look at life, so that when they look and see it, they can like, okay, but that's not who we are. That's not what we believe in. So spend more time to strengthen them. And I'll use a short analogy, Becky, just before you close. When Moses was transitioning the Israelites into Canaan, he knew that they were going into a very pervasive culture. And the entire book of Deuteronomy is preparing them into a culture that was very, very perverse. And so he begins by telling them, remember, the Lord God is one, just reminding them of their faith and who they believe in. And then he say, impress them in your children, talk about them when you wake up, talk about them when you sleep, write them on your door frames, write them on your doorposts. So you have to saturate the children with the right content. That's not at all to say that they will not interact with the other content, but they will have a lens through which to critique it, or at least they know where the anchors are. Tragedy is when that core has no character, nothing is holding in the middle. Then anything now comes in, and that is where now you end up with just being swept by the cultural. And so it's some of these things for me, I find them very practical. They're not like a halo effect of being spiritual. They're just very practical things. When you say, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind, it is very practical. That if you spend time with what you believe, and just like what St. Augustine said, culture is the outworking of a people's faith or a people's creed. You will behave what you believe. And so the thing to concentrate on at the core, strengthen the faith, then they're able now to engage their culture, and by that they will become, salt of the earth, light of the world. And so I would spend more time on the core and then put controls. Then you're able to work with the content and influence the culture now on the reverse.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much, Steve, Pala, Mufoi, Mugeshi, who haven't I mentioned? Yes, thank you so much for addressing our questions. Thank you for equipping us on how we can parent in a sexualized world. Now, there are a few feedback messages that we have received for a part 2. So on the reactions, please just put a thumbs up so that we see if there is need for parenting in a sexualized world part 2. Just go to the reactions button and put a thumbs up. A few more seconds. All right, the hosts will help me count them, what we can do. If you have any feedback, please feel free to share it with us. We would be glad to receive it. Also, if you have any suggestion of a topic you would like us to address, please, we would love to hear it from you. That being, we have taken 7 minutes of your time. We are really sorry. So we'll just end it as where we are, and I'll request someone to pray for us. Who can I request? Wallace, are you? Or let me actually ask Steve Kiteto to pray for us after he has given us a lot of information. Please just pray for us, and then we call it a day.
All right, thank you. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we are grateful that we're able to have these conversations and reflect on our culture. We thank you that you have given us tools and you've given us perspectives through your word that we are able to use to engage our culture that's becoming pervasive every day. But it's nothing that you did not warn us. It's, you know, it's just the way it is. I pray that the people of faith who are here, you will help them to grow deeper in their convictions of the faith, and that it will be said of us that we are hot, so that it will not be said, you know, we are cold or lukewarm, but that will be hot in terms of our faith. We pray, Father in heaven, there's many things that are happening even at the government level. We ask, Father in heaven, that even the reproductive health bill that's being discussed at the Senate, which has clauses that would open up even the whole area of sexuality in a negative way. We ask, Father in heaven, that, Lord, you would protect us against it, and that you'd help everything that we are doing to curb its progress. We ask that you may preserve us and preserve our nation, and that, Lord, will continue to be beacon of light and to be salt. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate you. We are looking forward to having another session with you. May God continually bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You are free to leave. Karibu sana. You are free to leave at your own pleasure. Yes?
I'm saying thanks, Mugeshi. Thanks, Mufoe. Thanks, Reverend Pala, for contributing in the Kijiji conversation.
Thank you for
I like how you say Kijiji conversations. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.